The UFS Dakota dropped out of warp space at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and immediately the bridge erupted in alarm sounds. The tactical display showed 3 Vex destroyers in orbit around the mining colony's planet, their dark metal hulls gleaming against the stars. Smaller fighter craft swarmed around them like angry insects, diving toward the planet's surface to attack anything that moved. Captain Lisa Morgan stood behind Lieutenant Amy Carter's communication station, listening to the desperate radio chatter. From the colony below, families were trapped in burning buildings. Children were crying for their parents. Transport ships were trying to escape the planet's atmosphere, but Vex fighters were hunting them down one by one. "Captain," Commander Jake Sullivan called from the tactical station, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from those destroyers. They're charging their main weapons for another bombardment of the colony." Lisa watched the tactical screen, her mind racing through possibilities. The Dakota was a good ship, but it was built for exploration, not war. They had shields and weapons, but nothing compared to what the Vex machines carried. In a straight fight, they would last maybe 10 minutes. "How long before the colony's shields fail completely?" she asked. "Maybe 30 minutes, Amy reported, her voice tight with worry. "Administrator Davis says they're running on emergency power. The Vex have been bombing them for hours." Lisa looked at the asteroid field that surrounded the planet. Kepler 442b was a mining world because it sat in the middle of a rich belt of space rocks, some as small as cars, others as big as city blocks. The miners had been harvesting precious metals from those asteroids for 5 years. Now those same rocks might be the key to saving their lives. "Helen," Lisa called to the navigator, "plot a course through the asteroid field. I want us to come up behind the Vex formation." Navigator Helen Brooks frowned at her instruments. "Captain, navigating that field at combat speed is extremely dangerous. One wrong move and we'll be crushed. Can you do it or not?" Helen's fingers flew over her controls. After a moment, she nodded. "I can do it, but it's going to be rough. Everyone better hold on tight." Lisa returned to her captain's chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We're about to engage 3 enemy destroyers with support from approximately 50 fighter craft. The odds are not in our favor, but we have something they don't. We have a reason to fight. We're not just following orders or programming. We're fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. Battle stations, everyone. This is what we came here to do." Chief Engineer Pete Williams spoke up from his station. "Captain, I can give you more power to shields and weapons, but I'll have to shut down non-essential systems. That includes life. Support on decks 7 through 12. Do it," Lisa ordered. "How much more power can you give me?" "Maybe 40% increase to shields, 60% to weapons." "But Captain, this will burn out our power systems if we keep it up for more than an hour. Then we better finish this fight quickly." The Dakota plunged into the asteroid field, weaving between massive rocks that could crush the ship if Helen made even a small mistake. Behind them, Vex fighters detected their approach and began pursuit, but the narrow spaces between asteroids made it impossible for the enemy to bring their full numbers to bear. "First contact in 30 seconds, Jake reported. The lead destroyer is turning to face us." Lisa gripped the arms of her chair as the ship shook from weapon impacts. Through the view screen, she could see the sleek, deadly shape of a Vex destroyer emerging from behind a large asteroid. Its hull was black metal covered in weapon ports, and its artificial intelligence brain was already calculating the best way to destroy the human ship. "Fire all weapons," Lisa commanded. The Dakota's weapon systems unleashed everything they had. Energy beams and missile warheads struck the Vex destroyer's shields, causing bright flashes of light in the darkness of space. For a moment, Lisa felt hope as the enemy ship staggered under the assault. Then the Vex destroyer returned fire, and the Dakota's world turned into chaos. The ship bucked and rolled as enemy weapons tore through their shields. Lights flickered on the bridge, and Lisa could smell the sharp scent of burning electronics. "Shields down to 60%, Jake called out over the noise. "Hull breach on Deck 9. "Damage control teams to Deck 9, Lisa ordered, then turned to her navigator. "Helen, get us behind that large asteroid. Use it for cover." The Dakota dove behind a massive space rock just as the second Vex destroyer opened fire. The asteroid absorbed the weapon impacts that would have destroyed the human ship, buying them precious seconds to regroup. "Captain," Amy said urgently, "I'm getting a transmission from the colony. They're reporting Vex ground forces landing near the main settlement. Those people are going to be overrun." Lisa stared at the tactical display, her mind working through the problem. 3 enemy destroyers, dozens of fighters, and now ground forces attacking the colonists directly. The Dakota was already damaged, and they hadn't even been fighting for 5 minutes. But then she noticed something on the scanner. The Vex ships were positioned in a tight formation around the planet, focusing their attention on bombing the surface. They weren't expecting an attack from the asteroid field. "Pete," she called to the engineer, "can you give me one massive power surge? Everything we have all at once?" "Captain, that would overload our entire power grid. We might lose main power completely. But could you do it?" Pete was quiet for a moment, then nodded grimly. "Yes, ma'am. But it would be a one-shot deal. After that, we'd be running on emergency power only." Lisa looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These people trusted her with their lives. They had followed her into an impossible battle because they believed in doing the right thing. Now she was asking them to risk everything on a desperate gamble. "Amy," she said quietly, "open a channel to the colony." The young communications officer's fingers moved across her console. "Channel open, Captain." "Colony Administrator Davis, this is Captain Morgan of the UFS Dakota. We're here to help, but I need you to do something for me. In exactly 2 minutes, I need every ship you have left to launch from the surface. Every transport, every shuttle, every personal craft that can fly. Don't worry about the Vex fighters. Just get those ships in the air and head for the outer system." The administrator's voice crackled through the static. "Captain, we have maybe 12 ships left that can still fly. The Vex will destroy them before they clear the atmosphere." Lisa smiled grimly. "No, they won't. Because in 2 minutes, those Vex destroyers are going to have bigger problems to worry about. Trust me." She closed the channel and turned to her crew. "Helen, plot a course straight through the center of their formation. Pete, prepare for maximum power surge on my command. Jake, target the lead destroyer's main reactor. Amy, broadcast our surrender on all frequencies." Jake stared at her in shock. "Captain, did you just say surrender?" "Trust me," Lisa said, settling back in her chair. "Sometimes the best way to win a fight is to make your enemy think you've already lost." The courtroom on Coalition Station Alpha was packed with beings from across the galaxy. Humans sat next to tall blue-skinned Xanthari diplomats. The insect-like hegemony representatives clicked their mandibles nervously in the front row. News reporters from dozens of worlds pointed their cameras at the defendant's table, where Captain Lisa Morgan sat in her dress uniform, her hands folded calmly in front of her. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler, 442b. 3 months. Since Lisa had saved 3,000 colonists by destroying 2 Vex destroyers and forcing the third to retreat. 3 months since Admiral Ryan Parker had arrived with the Coalition fleet to find the colony intact and Captain Morgan under arrest for violating the non-interference doctrine. The trial had been the biggest news story in Coalition space. Every day, the media reported on new developments, new witnesses, new arguments from both sides. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, some calling Lisa a hero, others demanding she be executed for breaking the sacred peace treaties. Prosecutor General Martha Thompson stood before the tribunal of 5 judges, representing the major species of the coalition. She was a stern woman with gray hair and cold eyes, known for never losing a case. Today she wore the formal robes of coalition justice, dark blue with silver trim that marked her rank. "Honorable judges," Martha began, her voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "The defendant, Captain Lisa Morgan, stands accused of 3 serious crimes. First, violation of the non-interference doctrine, which clearly states that no coalition member may interfere in conflicts between other species. Second, violation of the chain of command protocol by acting without authorization from Coalition High Command. Third, violation of the Species Sovereignty Act by attacking Vex forces in their lawfully designated territory." She walked slowly in front of the judge's bench, her footsteps echoing in the large room. The facts are simple and undisputed. Captain Morgan received direct orders to observe, but not engage. She chose to ignore those orders. Her actions, regardless of their outcome, have damaged our relationship with the Vex Collective and threatened the peace that has protected billions of lives for 3 years. Martha turned to face Lisa directly. The defendant will claim she was saving lives. But what about the lives that may be lost if the Vex break their treaty because of her actions? What about the billions of beings who depend on coalition law to protect them? Captain Morgan put her personal feelings above the greater good of the galaxy. Lisa's defense attorney, Commander Carl Johnson, was a former military officer himself. He had served in the Coalition Navy for 20 years before becoming a lawyer. He was younger than Martha, with kind eyes and a reputation for taking difficult cases. Many people wondered why he had agreed to defend someone who seemed obviously guilty. Carl stood up when Martha finished, his own uniform neat and pressed. "Honorable judges, my client did indeed break coalition law. We do not dispute the facts of the case, but we ask you to consider why those laws exist in the first place." He activated a holographic display that showed images from the Kepler 442b colony. Families hugging their children. Rescue workers pulling survivors from damaged buildings. Transport ships loaded with evacuees who would have died without the Dakota's intervention. The coalition was formed to protect life and promote peace among the species of our galaxy. Every law we have written, every treaty we have signed, exists to serve that goal. But what happens when following the law means letting innocent people die? Carl walked toward the witness stand, where several colonists waited to testify. "The prosecution asks us to consider the lives that might be lost if the Vex break their treaty. I ask you to consider the lives that were definitely saved because one captain chose to do what was right instead of what was easy." The first witness was Administrator Ben Davis from the colony. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and tired eyes, still recovering from the trauma of the attack. His voice shook slightly as he spoke. "Captain Morgan saved my daughter's life," he said simply. "She saved all our lives. The Vex machines were bombing our shelters. Our children were hiding in basements, terrified and crying. We had maybe 30 minutes before our shields failed completely. If the Dakota hadn't come when it did, we would all be dead." One by one, the colonists told their stories. A mother described carrying her baby to safety while Vex fighters strafed the evacuation zone. An elderly man talked about watching his neighbors' homes burn while they waited for help that almost never came. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, looked directly at Lisa and said, "Thank you for saving my daddy." The prosecution called their own witnesses. Admiral Parker testified that Lisa had directly disobeyed his orders. A Vex representative, speaking through a mechanical translator, claimed that the attack on their forces was an act of war. Coalition diplomats explained how difficult it had been to prevent the peace treaty from collapsing completely, but the most powerful testimony came from Lisa's own crew. Commander Jake Sullivan took the stand, still wearing his uniform, still officially Lisa's first officer, even though she was under arrest. "Captain Morgan is the best officer I've ever served with," Jake said firmly. "She cares more about her crew and about innocent people than she does about her own career." When we got that distress call from the colony, we all knew what the right thing to do was. The captain just had the courage to do it. Chief Engineer Pete Williams testified about Lisa's tactical brilliance during the battle. Navigator Helen Brooks described how Lisa had risked everything to save people she had never met. Lieutenant Amy Carter, now promoted to full lieutenant, spoke about Lisa's leadership and moral character. Even some coalition officers testified in Lisa's defense. Captain Tony Martinez of the USS Houston said he wished he had been brave enough to make the same choice. Commander Linda Foster admitted that many officers in the fleet privately supported Lisa's actions. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Every day, more protesters gathered outside the courthouse. Human colonies across the galaxy held prayer vigils for Lisa. Some alien species praised her courage, while others demanded harsh punishment to preserve the law. On the final day, Lisa herself took the stand. She wore her dress uniform with all her medals and ribbons, looking every inch the professional naval officer she had always been. The courtroom fell completely silent as she was sworn in. Carl asked her only one question. "Captain Morgan, do you regret your actions at Kepler 442b?" Lisa looked around the courtroom at the faces watching her. She saw the colonists she had saved, sitting in the front row with their families. She saw her crew, who had followed her into battle knowing it might end their careers. She saw the judges, waiting for her to show remorse for breaking their sacred laws. "I regret that 37 members of my crew died in that battle," she said quietly. "I regret that good people had to suffer because of a situation they didn't create. I regret that it took breaking the law to do what should have been automatic. But I do not regret saving 3,000 innocent lives. If that makes me a criminal in your eyes, then your laws are worth less than the lives they failed to protect." The courtroom erupted in noise. Some people cheered, others shouted in anger. The judges called for order, but it took several minutes for the room to quiet down. Martha Thompson stood for her closing argument, her face grim. The defendant shows no remorse for her crimes. She admits her guilt, but refuses to accept that her actions were wrong. This court must send a clear message that no one, regardless of their intentions, is above coalition law. Carl's closing was simple. "My client saved 3,000 lives. That is not a crime. That is heroism." The judges deliberated for 3 days while the galaxy waited. When they returned, their verdict would change everything. The judges found Lisa Morgan guilty on all charges. The sentence was life imprisonment on Titan Base, a cold prison world at the edge of coalition space. As the security guards led her away in chains, protesters outside the courthouse sang her name. News reporters called it the trial of the century, but for Lisa, it was simply the end of her military career. Titan Base was a harsh place, built for the worst criminals in the galaxy. The prison sat on a frozen moon where the temperature never rose above -50 degrees. Lisa spent her days in a small cell, reading books and writing letters to her former crew. She refused all interview requests from reporters who wanted to hear her story. 5 years passed slowly. Lisa aged in her cell, her dark hair turning gray, her uniform replaced by plain prison clothes. She watched the news broadcasts when they were allowed, learning about the changes happening in the galaxy. Some coalition worlds had started calling for reforms to the non-interference doctrine. Others demanded stricter enforcement of the laws she had broken. Then everything changed. Vex Collective broke their peace treaty on a Tuesday morning. Without warning, their war machines attacked 17 worlds simultaneously. The artificial intelligences had been planning this assault for years, building secret fleets while the coalition believed in their promises of peace. Within hours, entire star systems were under attack. The Coalition High Command was caught completely off guard. Admiral Parker, now Supreme Commander of all Coalition forces, called emergency meetings with representatives from every member species. They had the largest military force in galactic history, but they had no idea how to use it effectively. The Vex machines were different from any enemy the Coalition had faced before. They did not negotiate, they did not retreat, and they did not show mercy. Their artificial intelligence brains calculated the most efficient ways to destroy planets and kill populations. They struck at military bases, civilian centers, and refugee camps with equal precision. Coalition forces fought back, but their efforts were hampered by the same rules and regulations that had sent Lisa to prison. Every military action required approval from multiple committees. Field commanders had to wait for permission before engaging enemy forces. By the time the paperwork was complete, the Vex machines had already moved on to their next target. 3 months into the war, the Coalition was losing badly. 7 worlds had fallen completely. Billions of people were dead or missing. The Vex fleets were moving toward the core worlds, the heart of Coalition civilization. It was Commander Jake Sullivan, now captain of his own ship, who made the suggestion that changed everything. He stood before the Coalition War Council in their emergency session on Earth, still wearing his battle-damaged uniform from the defense of New Geneva. "We need Lisa Morgan," he said simply. The room fell silent. Admiral Parker stared at him in disbelief. "Captain Sullivan, Lisa Morgan is a convicted criminal serving a life sentence. She violated every principle of Coalition law. She also won the only decisive victory against Vex forces in the last 50 years, Jake replied. She understood how to fight them because she was willing to take risks and make hard decisions. Our current strategy is failing because we're trying to fight a war with peacetime rules." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some council members were horrified at the idea of releasing a convicted felon to command military forces. Others pointed out that desperate times required desperate measures. The Xanthari representative reminded everyone that Lisa had saved thousands of lives on Kepler 442b. The hegemony delegate argued that releasing her would destroy the rule of law. In the end, it was the news from the front lines that made the decision for them. The Vex had broken through the outer defense ring and were heading straight for Earth. They had maybe 2 weeks before humanity's home world was under direct attack. Admiral Parker made the announcement himself. By emergency authorization of the Coalition War Council, prisoner Lisa Morgan is hereby released from custody and restored to active duty with the rank of Fleet Admiral. She will be given command of the largest human battle group ever assembled, and full authority to conduct military operations against Vex forces. Lisa learned about her release when the prison warden came to her cell personally. She had been reading a book about ancient Earth history when he appeared with 2 Coalition officers she had never seen before. "Morgan," the warden said, "you're free to go. Congratulations, Admiral." The title sounded strange after 5 years of being called only by her prisoner number. Lisa packed her few belongings and walked out of Titan Base into the cold sunlight, wondering if this was all some kind of dream. Her new flagship was the USS Defiance, the largest warship humanity had ever built. It was 3 times the size of the old Dakota, with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But more importantly, it was crewed by volunteers who had asked specifically to serve under her command. Her old crew was there waiting for her. Jake Sullivan had been promoted to captain and served as her second in command. Amy Carter was now a full commander in charge of communications. Helen Brooks had turned down retirement to navigate for Lisa one more time. Even Pete Williams, despite being eligible for pension, had requested transfer to the Defiance. "Welcome back, Admiral," Jake said with a smile as Lisa stepped onto her new bridge. "We have a war to win." Lisa looked around at the faces of her crew, some old friends and some new faces, all of them ready to follow her into battle. The weight of command settled on her shoulders again, familiar and comfortable, despite the years in prison. "What's our tactical situation?" she asked. "Bad," Jake replied honestly. "The Vex have 17 major fleets moving toward the core worlds. Our forces are scattered and trying to defend too many targets at once. High Command wants us to take a defensive position around Earth and wait for them to come to us." Lisa studied the tactical display showing Vex movements across the galaxy. The artificial intelligences were using the same strategy they had always used: overwhelming force applied at multiple points simultaneously. But she could see patterns in their movements, weaknesses in their formations that the coalition strategists had missed. "Belay those orders," she said calmly. "We're not going to wait for them to choose the time and place of battle. Amy, send a message to all coalition forces. Tell them Fleet Admiral Morgan is taking command of offensive operations. We're going to hit them where they don't expect it." The campaign that followed became known as the Morgan Offensive. Instead of defending fixed positions, Lisa took her fleet on a series of lightning raids against Vex supply lines and command ships. She used the same tactics that had worked at Kepler 442b, striking fast and hard before the enemy could respond effectively. The battle for Earth came sooner than expected. The Vex main fleet broke through the Sol defense grid, while Lisa's forces were attacking their rear lines. She received the emergency transmission while her ships were refueling at a hidden base in the asteroid belt. "Admiral," Amy reported, her voice tight with worry, "Vex forces have reached Earth orbit. The planetary defense fleet is heavily outnumbered. They're requesting immediate assistance." Lisa looked at the tactical display. Her fleet was still damaged from their last engagement, and they were outnumbered 3-1 by the Vex machines surrounding humanity's home world. It was the same impossible odds she had faced 5 years ago at Kepler 442b. "All ships," she announced over the fleet communication channel. "This is Admiral Morgan. We're going home." Lisa Morgan walked slowly across the big campus. Her heavy boots made soft sounds on the stone paths. Students ran past her, laughing and talking loudly. They carried bright backpacks and wore colorful clothes. Lisa carried only one old green bag on her shoulder. She was 24 years old, but felt much older. For the past 6 years, she had been far away from Earth. She had been fighting in space wars that most people on Earth never heard about. Now she was back to go to school like a normal person. The university was huge. Tall buildings reached toward the sky. Green grass covered the ground between the paths. Trees grew everywhere, and flowers bloomed in careful rows. Lisa had not seen so many living things in one place for a long time. In space, everything was metal and glass and empty darkness. A group of students sat under a big tree. They were eating lunch and talking about a party that weekend. One girl complained about having too much homework. A boy threw a small ball at his friend and missed. They all laughed when the ball hit another student who was walking by. Lisa stopped and watched them. They looked so young and happy. They had no idea that people their age were dying in space battles every day. They did not know that alien ships were trying to reach Earth right now. They lived in a safe bubble where the biggest worry was a math test or a broken heart. She found her dorm room on the 3rd floor of Miller Hall. The door was already open. Inside, a girl with long blonde hair was putting posters on the wall. The posters showed cartoon animals and movie stars. Pink and purple blankets covered one of the beds. "Hi, you must be Lisa," the girl said with a big smile. "I'm Katie Barnes. I'm so excited to have a roommate. I was worried I would get someone boring, but you look really interesting." Lisa put her bag on the empty bed. "Nice to meet you, Katie." Katie talked while she unpacked. She came from a small town in Ohio. She had never been on an airplane before coming to college. She wanted to study art and maybe become a teacher. She asked Lisa lots of questions about where she came from and what she did before college. "I was in the military," Lisa said. She did not want to explain more. "Oh wow, that's so cool," Katie said. "Like, did you get to travel to different places?" "My cousin was in the army and he got to go to Germany. He said the food there was really weird, but the people were nice." Lisa nodded but did not answer. She had traveled to places that Katie could not imagine. She had seen alien worlds and fought battles in the cold darkness between stars. But she could not talk about any of it. The next morning, Lisa went to her first class. It was called Introduction to Space Engineering. The classroom was big with white walls and bright lights. About 30 students sat in rows of desks. Most of them looked very young. Professor Alan Hayes stood at the front of the room. He had gray hair and wore a blue shirt with a tie. He looked smart but soft, like someone who had spent his whole life reading books instead of doing dangerous things. "Welcome to Space Engineering," he said. "In this class, we will learn about the basic science of traveling between planets and stars. We will study how rockets work and why it is so hard to go faster than light." Lisa listened as he talked about theories and equations. He explained why scientists thought it was impossible to travel faster than light speed. He drew pictures on the board, showing how spaceships could never go beyond certain speeds. Lisa had to bite her tongue to stay quiet. She had been on ships that went much faster than what the professor said was possible. She had seen human technology that broke all the rules he was teaching. But she could not say anything. The military had told her never to talk about the secret technology they used in the war. A student raised her hand. "Professor Hayes, do you think we will ever really travel to other star systems?" "That is a good question, Amy," the professor said. "Maybe someday we will find new physics that let us go faster. But with what we know now, it would take hundreds of years to reach even the closest star." Lisa thought about the star system where she had fought her last battle. She had been there just 6 months ago. The trip from Earth took only 3 weeks, in a military ship. But she sat quietly and pretended to take notes. After class, some students stayed to talk with each other. They discussed their weekend plans and complained about other classes. Lisa walked past them toward the door. "Hey, you're Lisa, right?" a boy said. His name was Jake Miller. He had brown hair and friendly eyes. "Want to study together sometime? This class looks pretty hard." "Sure," Lisa said. She was trying to be normal and make friends. "Great, there's a coffee shop on campus where a bunch of us meet. You should come." Lisa nodded and left the building. Outside, she saw students playing games on the grass. Some threw a round disc back and forth. Others kicked a ball around. Everyone seemed so carefree and happy. She walked to her next class, which was about politics and government. The professor was a woman named Nancy Ford. She was younger than Professor Hayes and had short, dark hair. She wore a red dress and spoke in a loud, clear voice. "Today we will talk about current events," Professor Ford said. "Can anyone tell me what is happening in the news right now?" A student raised his hand. "There's that war thing going on in space, but I don't really understand it." "Good point, Ryan," the professor said. "The government says we are fighting aliens, but we don't get much information about it. What do you think about this conflict?" Ryan Cooper was tall with black hair. He wore a shirt with words about peace written on it. "I think war is always wrong," he said. "There has to be a better way to solve problems. Maybe we should try talking to these aliens instead of fighting them." Other students nodded and agreed. They talked about how violence never solved anything. They said the government was probably lying about the aliens being dangerous. Maybe the aliens just wanted to be friends and humans were the ones being mean. Lisa gripped her pen so hard it almost broke. She wanted to tell them about the colonies she had seen destroyed. She wanted to explain about the alien messages that said humans must surrender or die. She wanted to show them pictures of the cities turned to glass and the people who never came home, but she stayed quiet. She pretended to listen and take notes. Inside, she felt like she was drowning in a world that did not understand anything real. When class ended, Lisa walked back to her dorm room. Katie was there with two other girls, painting their fingernails bright colors. They were talking about boys and movies and what to wear to a party. "Lisa, come join us," Katie said. "We're doing makeovers." "I have to study," Lisa said. She sat at her desk and opened her books, but she could not focus on the words. She kept thinking about her friends, who were still fighting in space. She wondered if Commander Nick Davis was still alive. She thought about the young pilots who looked up to her and trusted her to keep them safe. Here on Earth, in this safe, comfortable place, it felt like that other world did not exist. It felt like the war was just a story someone made up. But Lisa knew better. She knew that people were dying right now to keep this campus safe and peaceful. She closed her books and looked out the window. Students walked by, laughing and holding hands. They had no idea how lucky they were. They had no idea what it cost to keep them safe. Lisa had come back to Earth to learn new things and become a better officer. But she was starting to wonder if she would ever fit into this world of homework and parties and normal problems. She felt like a ghost, invisible and unable to touch anything real. She missed the simple honesty of space combat. Out there, everyone knew what they were fighting for. Here, no one seemed to know there was a war at all.